Good evening and welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing of Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. Obviously, we're not at the town hall. We're still via Zoom, but it's my understanding that the next meeting, and I'm going to announce it now, the next meeting that we have is scheduled for Wednesday, March 23rd at 6:00 p.m. And that will be in person in room 304 at Town Hall, located at 400 Slocum Road. So the next thing we have are administrative matters. It appears that we have none tonight. So the first matter that we have for tonight's hearing is a variance case. And the petitioner in the case is Michael T. Fernandez. The subject property is located at 47 East Avenue, known as map 105, lot 86.
Mr. Chair, if I may, before we start with the
Can we do a
hearing-
roll call vote?
Yeah, this is for attendance,
Yeah.
because this is a Zoom meeting, so we have
Yeah,
to. do
yes.
that.
All right, I was just gonna finish this first portion of this and then we'll
Yeah,
do a roll
sure.
call vote.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, because we're gonna need a vote, I guess that would make sense because of the the abutters list. So at this point, I'm gonna pause the hearing and I'm gonna conduct a roll call vote of all the members who are on. I think we only have we have four. We have one alternate member tonight. All right, so let's start with Attorney Human.
Alvin Newman, present.
Halim Chuba, present.
Rahim Agai, present.
And Michael Maderas present. So tonight, for tonight's hearings, we have three voting members, which will be myself, Attorney Human, and and Halim Shuba. Dr. Agai will be our alternate for this evening. So I will now move back to the hearing for variance case number 2022-04. The petitioner was Michael Fernandez. The matter was legally advertised on February 23rd, 2022, and on March 2nd, 2022, and abutters were notified in accordance with law.
Make a motion that we waive the reading of the abutters list for case 2022-04.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Halim Chuba, yes.
Alvin Newman, yes.
And Michael Maderas is a yes. The petitioner in this case is seeking a variance to raise the existing 22 by 22 dwelling near the northwest corner of the site, replace it with a 27 by 29 foot two-stall garage on the first floor with a 783 square foot accessory apartment on the second floor. It is proposed to keep the front yard setback at 5.1 and to have the side yard setback at 10.9 feet, where currently the side yard setback is 10.6 feet. The property is located at 47 East Avenue in the single residence B district and identified as Assessors Map 105, Lot 86, and they're seeking relief under Article 8, Section 375-2D, Accessory Apartments, 3D1. So let me go to the petition here filed, the application, it should say filed by the petitioner. See if we have any comments. We have a comment from the planning department that says ZBA should confirm that two separate detached garages, one with accessory apartment, are allowed on the same site. The historical commission should also be, I don't know if it says contacted for something given the age of the structure. So I guess that's something obviously our building commissioner would probably have them undergo prior to the issuance of a building permit. We got also a comment from the Board of Health, which says the project falls within jurisdiction of Board of Health for something applicant. Can't read what it says. Anyone else know what that says? Halim?
No.
Okay. And then we've got comments from the Conservation Commission, okay with the proposed project as submitted. Erosion /sedimentation controls must be placed between the project and the resource area. And I think they're referring to Paydaram Harbor there, or the waterway. And we have no other comments. So gentlemen, is there anything that I've missed before I ask the petitioner to come forward, or are there anything you guys like to add before I ask the petitioner to plead their case?
No, usually you have a letter from the building commissioner. I don't know if you want to just,
I didn't see it in my packet.
oh,
Have it.
maybe,
Well, do you want to, if you have it, Halim, I'm more than glad. Oh, no, that's the legal ad notice. I did not get it in part of my packet.
well, basically it's the review of Mr. Braga and saying that you need the variance from the zoning board of appeals because your proposed apartment is not, it's detached from the structure. So basically that's why they're here. And I think, this is under section Article 8, Section 375-2D accessory apartment.
I thank you for that. I always enjoy having those letters because it certainly gives me some guidance and direction as to what the thought and the thought process is of the building commissioner. But unfortunately, I don't think I had one here. And if I did, I did not happen to see it. So anything else? Anyone else wants to add? Attorney Human?
No,
Okay, so at this time, I'm going to call upon the petitioner's representative, who I believe is Richard Rayom of Prime Engineering, to come forward and explain the case to us.
Right, Rich Frayom, Prime Engineering. We prepared the plans and the petition. The existing detached apartment is occupied by the proponent's daughter. And pretty cramped existing apartment. And they merely want to add a garage under because everything's so close to the street that guests would be parking in the street. And so providing extra 2 parking spaces in the garage would help the neighborhood. And then the proposal is just as you build a accessory apartment for their daughter that's under 800 square feet above that garage, keeping the same side yard and front yard setbacks essentially. And in the petition, we submitted the architecturals. I think the architect did a very good job of making the existing building and the proposed apartment be comparable in material and the aesthetics. That's my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rayom. Gentlemen, do you have any questions?
I have questions, but you're asking that an apartment go above the garage, but you are not keeping the building in the footprint. So as a result, you need a variance for side yard, setback, and frontage. And that's not requested in the petition unless I'm missing it.
Yeah, that's correct. The spirit of the law is that if you have an existing non-conforming structure, you're allowed to maintain that setback and to continue it, extend it laterally until you reach the next zoning setback line. So we thought that getting the variance for this would provide all the relief we needed.
No, the bylaw requires you to comply with the zoning side yards and setbacks that you're not doing. You haven't asked for that. You've asked only for the accessory apartment. So your petition doesn't say I need, the side yard, the frontage, well, the frontage is 5 feet, you need 60. The side yard is 10, you need 20. You're not asking for that in your petition, at least I don't see it in there. And the bylaw specifically says, where is it?
But Alvin, I think we have an exception. We have an exception to that. And maybe the building commissioner can provide us some insight as to his opinion on this.
His opinion's in the letter.
And I don't know if I don't have the letter.
Oh. Well, I'll let him comment himself, but in the letter, he says, where is it?
All right. Sorry, gentlemen, I was finally able to, they had me blocked. I couldn't unmute. So they just released me.
Mhm.
All right.
When it comes to the accessory apartment, Mr. Chair, there is no exception. That before the 1993 setbacks, that exemption is not allowed. Where it's an accessory apartment, it's very clear that they need to meet the current setbacks per the zoning that I cited.
Well, then his petition fails to request all the relief that he needs.
Mhm.
So that would require a resubmission with a new publication, because people would have to know that that's the relief that he's seeking.
Yes,
I agree.
All right.
Because he's raising the building, I mean, completely, that's why it just triggered it,
So the letter from the building commissioner is stating that we needed the variances from the front yard and side yard setbacks, and our petition failed to ask for that relief.
Unfortunately, Mr. Riom, I didn't have the benefit of having that letter. If I had had that, obviously, I would have probably raised it earlier on at the beginning phases of this hearing. So if I'm to understand this correctly, even only if you were to construct it within the same
Same footprint.
confines or the same footprint of the
Mhm.
existing structure, then you would not have to seek you would not have to seek any relief at that point, I would suggest.
correct.
Other than the fact that it's a two-story structure, but I think you're allowed to do that. But given that you are expanding it beyond the existing footprint, not only do you need to seek relief from that provision of the bylaw, but you also have to seek provision of the front yard setback and the side yard setback.
Okay,
But gentlemen, if he does that at that point, he could restructure. I think he was trying to avoid that, and that's why he kept the structure so close to the front of the property. I think, quite frankly, they might rather enjoy having it set back further from the roadway, back maybe as close to 60 feet as they could without interfering with waterways and whatever else. I think that that's something that they. What? Is someone saying anything? Halim,
Yeah, I'm not sure if they want to do, yeah, but go ahead, Michael, I'm not sure.
no, listen, I'm just thinking, Halim, at that point, just to get a sense as to where we would be with something like this.
Right,
Rather than having it so close to the road, slightly further back.
yeah, maybe they can make it more conforming, that's what you're referring at too, because, but
As far as the setbacks go.
So,
So just as a point of guidance, I personally, and I'm only speaking for myself, Mr. Rion, I don't
Yeah.
have a problem with the expansion of the structure by a couple hundred square feet or whatever it is, the number of square feet that your client proposes. Quite frankly, I think that promotes better use of the property. It probably promotes a situation where you're more likely to have family members or a better type of occupant on the premise. So that doesn't bother me. But if you're gonna have to come back for relief, I know, in my opinion would be, and I wait for you, and I wait for you to get some other input from Attorney Human, is
Mhm.
if it were slightly further back from the road than what it is, that would be better.
okay, yeah. Yeah, it would slide it opposite the windows of the abutter. But my client could meet with the abutter and find out if they were fine with it being in front of their windows.
Well, I don't want to create a situation where you have a neighbor on board or an abutter on board and then create a situation where they're not going to be on board. I don't want that either.
Right.
But
So the
Attorney
neighborhood-
Human, your thoughts on this?
I didn't really have a problem with what he's trying to do. My
mhm.
problem is you should comply with the bylaw as best you can.
Yeah.
Well, not
I
only-
mean, that's what we're here, trying to enforce bylaws. And so that was my big concern when I saw the petition.
Okay,
And I guess the language in the bylaw itself says that the detached accessory structure must comply with current setback, height, and lot coverage. So I'm not sure, and the building commissioner would know the answer to this. If he even stayed within the confines of the current structure, whether he could avoid, I don't think he can, trying to comply with the setback requirements.
But I don't think he needs to seek relief at that point. I got to go back and look at this exception, because I know that Mr. Riom had referenced this exception, I think somewhere in his narrative. Let me see if I can find it here. And I guess you're suggesting that this 1993 exception doesn't apply to an accessory apartment?
Mr. Chair, it does not apply to,
And, okay, and I'm not trying to be facetious, or I'm not
Right.
trying to engage you, but
Yeah, I
could you
know.
just explain to me why it is you believe it doesn't apply? Because it says non-conforming structures, which are legally in existence prior to 1926.
right,
I
but
mean,
it says,
prior to October 26, 1993, excuse me.
93.
but the language of the bylaws for the accessory apartments is stricter. And it's very clear that it says an accessory apartment must meet current setback and height. So it doesn't, they cannot get the exemption because of the bylaws very clear that the existing, if it's an existing detached accessory structure, that it must be two things. It can either be built within the footprint or it can be larger, that's fine. But it's very clear that the language says it must meet current. There's no exception allowed for an accessory apartment in the bylaw.
So are you of the opinion that even if he constructs it within the same footprint, he's still got to seek, he still has to seek relief from the front yard and side yard setback in this project?
According to the language of the bylaw, that is correct.
Okay, so is it possible for me to request a continuance to allow me to revise the petition, allow for additional advertising and ask for that additional relief?
No, absolutely, Mr. Riom, we'll grant you that. All right, well, Joe and I will have to just discuss this a little bit more. I think your interpretation is because of the fact that it sets the language saying the structure must comply with correct setback, height, and lot coverage requirements. Just give me a minute, please. I see. Okay. All right, Mr. Riom, yes. Well, at this point, I'd like to see if we'll open it up, see if there's anyone has any comments at this point. Just to see what feedback we might be receiving on the project that we might be able to address moving forward. So at this point, I'm going to ask if there's anyone else on this case for 47 East Avenue, if there's anyone who also supports this application. Mr. Manise, is there anyone out there?
Mr. Chair, I do not see anybody.
Okay. So at this time, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in opposition to this application.
There are no comments.
Okay. All right, so, gentlemen, I need a motion to I need a motion to entertain the request for a continuance.
Before we do that, Mr. Chair, I'd like you to just take a minute maybe and explain that, this petition is for a replacement of an existing apartment. So this way, if someone is watching right now and we don't want to create some confusion that people think I can go build a garage and put an apartment on top of it. So you just make sure that they understand this is a petition to replace an existing apartment that was in existence prior to the 1993 zoning bylaws. So it's an,
Yes. All right, so just for clarification for our viewers at home, this specific petition has to do with a detached accessory apartment. The bylaw that we provide, the structure must be in existence prior to 2006. This structure was in existence according to the representations that have been made to us circa 1907, that this structure was in existence, and it's been utilized as an apartment for an extensive amount of time. The petition the petitioner is requesting relief wherein they would be allowed to knock that building down, which they already have the ability to occupy it, to knock that down and construct a two-story structure. The first story having two-stall garage, and the second floor would accommodate an apartment. And the relief is being sought because they are expanding on it a few hundred square feet, more so than the existing structure. However, we're unable to move on this matter and their request because it appears that the petitioner needs to also request additional relief from side yard and front yard setbacks, which they're going to amend their application. They've asked for a continuance to amend the application to provide the appropriate notices to all relevant parties and have another day to come before this board to plead their request. So I'm inclined to grant that request. We just need a motion from the members of the board.
Tony Maderas.
before we make a motion, Mr. Chair, is Mr. Riom, is April 13th is good? That's the next meeting because the one after that is May. So
Yeah. That would give us plenty
April
of time.
13th will give you, okay, so
Yeah.
we need a motion. I make a motion that we,
Hold on, please.
Continue.
Hold on for 1 second, please. Attorney Maderas, did you mention that they got to go to historical commission or not?
Well, that's, be quite frank, that's not something that we have to address at
No.
this stage. That's something that the building inspector will require them to do if appropriate, based on whatever information he's provided. However, there was a notation from one of the boards as part of the application that indicated that it may have some historical significance, and therefore they should be notified. But we leave that upon the building commissioner. That's within his purview.
I was passing by and I saw a lot of signs that looks to be pretty old.
Oh, I'm sure it's pretty old. I haven't been by there in quite some time, but I have driven by that neighborhood before. It's quite secluded, but you're right, it is an old structure. It's been represented to us that it was built around 1907.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay,
okay, any, we're good?
I think we're good.
Okay. I make a motion that we continue variance case 2022-04 until April 13th, 2022.
I second that motion. Also at the request of the petitioner.
Yes.
At
the
yeah,
request of the
correct,
petitioner.
Attorney Newman, at the request of the petitioner, yes.
I second that motion.
Roll call vote.
Khalid
Excuse
Shuba,
me,
yes.
Hold on. Yes, Michelle.
Excuse me, it's on April 13th?
Yes, that's the next, yeah, well, the next one is March 23, right?
Yeah, Halima, I believe you said April 15th. That's all.
Well,
It's April
13th.
13th.
April 13th,
I'm going in and out here.
April
April
13th.
13th.
Yes, that's what I understood was April 13th.
Yeah.
All right,
That's what I
just,
understood.
all right, just for clarification, can you
Please.
renew the motion?
I make a motion to continue variance case 2022-04 to April 13th, 2022, as requested by the petitioner.
Thank
I
you.
second that motion.
Roll call vote. All in
Khalid Shuba.
favor?
Yes,
Alvin Newman, yes.
And Michael Maderis is a yes. All right, we'll see you on the 13th, Mr. Rayom.
Okay, thank you
Mr.
very much.
Rayom.
I appreciate it. Yes. Yes,
Oh, Mr. Rayon, I'm gonna call you tomorrow because I'm gonna have to get that new application and legal ad in by the end of the week or early next week, the latest, for you to be able to be on the 13th, okay? So I'll
Right.
give you a call tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Thank you.
All right. So the next matter we have on for this evening is a continued case from our last hearing date. And it is a use variance case, and it's case number 2022-01. The petitioner.
Michael Fernandez.
The petitioner is Claudia Arsenio. The subject property is located at 155 Old Fall River Road. It's also known as Dartmouth Assessors Map 69, Lot 16. It's located, the portion in which they're seeking to have relief or a variance is within the limited industrial area. The matter has been previously advertised, and we have already waived the reading of the abutters list. The petitioner is seeking a use variance to construct an 80 by 100 square foot structure for a marijuana manufacturing facility, and is seeking relief under Article 4, Section 375.4.2 and Article 4, Section Section 375.4.3, special permit uses. So, since last week, since the last hearing, I should say, we've had numerous correspondence of people both in favor and in opposition to this request. So I'm going to start off, if we may. I see that Attorney Manning is available, but I'm going to start off by reading these letters. And I understand that this can be a bit boring. However, I think it's quite rather important. And I say boring to some of the members and our viewers at home, but I think it's important that we get the input of everyone. And I'm sure some of the people are here to also provide any type of confirmation verbally as to what their position may be. But I'm going to start with some of the letters that are in support of this, and I'm also going to read the letters in opposition. And we also got some letters from other boards, if you will, or third parties that have an interest in this particular petition. So the first letter I have here this evening is a letter in support, and it's from a Darren Mendes, and it's dated September 6, 2021. It says, "My name is Darren Mendes. I have been living and farming my entire life in southern Bristol County. I have become familiar with a lot of farmers and farms throughout Bristol County. Currently, I manage Triple S Farm located in Dartmouth and Westport. The farm produces grass-fed beef and hay on over 200 acres. I also serve as president of Bristol County Farm Bureau and have advised the Dartmouth Agricultural Committee from time to time. I have been asked for my opinion on the agricultural use and value of the farm located at 155 Old Fall River Road. I'm very familiar with the area and field conditions as I worked on the old McConville farm, which is located across the street for several years. Property owned by Ms. Arsenio is very challenging. One issue is the size of the farm is not adequate to sustain a profitable agricultural business. Secondly, the farm has a high water table. The farm abuts wetlands, and some of the land cultivated is likely wetlands as classified by Conservation Commission. This is extremely difficult to manage. Springtime is wet, so tilling and planting is at the mercy of Mother Nature. Crops may not thrive due to heavy soils and do not drain well and lacks oxygen, which is critical for roots to grow. Based on the farm being small in size and inadequate soil types for producing high-value crops, as well as a high groundwater table, I do not think Ms. Arsenio could operate a profitable farming operation on this farm to sustain an average family income. There would also be a benefit to the environment if some of the land was allowed to return to its natural vegetative state. The uplands part of the farm should be maintained as usable farmland. I'd be glad to answer any questions." So that's one letter. Next one I have here is dated February 11, 2022, and it's from a Billy Viveros. "My name is Billy Viveros. I have been a farmer in Dartmouth for the last 30 years. I ran a dairy farm on Fons Corner Road and have grown crops at several locations in town. I found the property at 155 Old Fall River Road for about 20 years prior to Ms. Arsenio's purchase. The property is tough because the land has a high water table. Farming the property was risky. You had to plant late and hope for a dry fall to get your crop out. Planting is done too late to hit the market on vegetables. The hard pan soil doesn't let the land drain, creating root rot and low yield. The farm lacks proper drainage and doesn't leave her much land to work with. There are no greenhouses or usable structures. At that time, the property was sold. The barns were already beyond repair. I have been helping Claudia farm the property since her divorce and have seen her work really hard to try to make it a go of it. It is hard enough to make a profit in farming these days when you have all the proper equipment and money. This past year, I watched her plant rows of flowers just to have the deer and woodchucks come eat it all the next day. There is about 2 acres of what I feel is usable high-value crops. Usable for value crops. It would be very difficult to make a living on that amount of space, if possible at all, never mind all the money the property needs for repairs. From my experience with corn there, after seed fertilizer equipment and work, there is very little profit left from what can be grown there. Materials are at an all-time high and the cost of farming is off the charts, making it very difficult to make a profit. If she chose to rent the fields, she would receive about $150 an acre per year. With less than 6 acres to offer, and most of those with a high water table, not many farmers would even bother coming in. For hay, alfalfa doesn't grow in wetland, so the hay grown on the property wouldn't have much value. Livestock has been proven difficult. The animals end up knee-deep in mud. Wet conditions have also caused the overgrowth of the invasive plants on the property, like Rosa multiflora, Russian olive, and Japanese knotweed. The property requires a lot of investment to be a successful farm, and sales from a few acres of crops may never be enough. I will answer any questions the town may have about my experience with the property. That was signed by Billy Viveros and it's dated February 11, 2022. I also received a letter from a Joshua Miller, who's a senator in the state of Rhode Island. He's a state senator. He writes to the chairman and members of the board. I write to support the applicant, Claudius Arsenio. As an owner of the Hot Club in Providence, Rhode Island, I personally know Claudia as an excellent employee for over 12 years. She is a hard worker with careful attention to details and an amicable engagement with customers. Getting to know her, I have observed and admired her commitment to her family and the farm. I am also a Rhode Island State Senator. I have represented District 28 since 2007. One of my priorities has been cannabis policy. I was a sponsor for much of the medical marijuana legislation. In 2010, I chaired a commission which examined the prohibition of cannabis. 2 years later, Rhode Island passed legislation that I proposed to decriminalize cannabis. I am currently the primary sponsor of legislation to regulate the sale of recreational marijuana in Rhode Island. Throughout these years, Ms. Arsenio has sought my advice as she carefully assembled a group of both investors and advisors as she assessed the potential to propose cultivation at her Dartmouth farm. I believe she has assembled the right group of attorneys, designers, engineers, and investors to lead a successful project for both her, family, and the town of Dartmouth. I am confident Claudia has done and will do everything necessary to plan, develop, and operate a successful cultivation project. And it's signed by Senator Joshua Miller. I've also received a letter from Miss Claudia Arsenio. However, we have our counsel here tonight and he can explain that. So I'm just going to table this letter for the moment. Now, in opposition, I have an email from Frank Leal, which he sent to Michelle, he forwarded to the members of the board. It's entitled Zoning Board of Appeals Members. My name is Frank Leal. I live at 54 Colebrook Lane. I am unable to attend the March 9th ZBA meeting in regards to the proposed marijuana manufacturing facility on 155 Old Fall River Road. However, I would like to express some concerns, which hopefully can be considered in the decision of the ZBA members. Mostly, I believe that if a proposal such as this were to receive approval by the ZBA, it would set precedent in that area. The area is so close to residential zoning and also close to yet outside of the marijuana overlay. In my opinion, if this precedent was set, it could have major impacts on land use and character in that area of town in the future. Although much of the land in that area is protected by APR, there are numerous lots that are not protected with the same zoning as this proposal. If, however, this proposal is approved by the ZBA, my hope is that members of the town boards would do everything necessary to minimize the impacts, lighting, noise, odors, etc., that this will have on neighbors. Signed, it's entitled Sincerely Frank Leal. And I believe this is dated Monday, March 7th, 2022. All right. Now, I have another letter, an opposition letter, and this is from a Michael Leverett. Hello, I received this letter about the proposed plan. I'm writing with great concern to this. Fons Corner Road already has considerable traffic and deforestation. This is not necessary for the town to keep dumping its unwanted via optics, but desirable properties on this end. I would argue that you would be very challenged to place this type of building in South Dartmouth. It goes to show that the more affluent sections of town get more consideration and we do not. I will be at this meeting and would like to voice my concerns. Any member of the town board who has anything to do with this will be directly challenged in the future when re-election comes along. If I'm correct, didn't a manufacturer open up on Route 6 in Westport? How many do we need? I might need to participate more in town meetings because you guys are selling us out. Best regards, Michael Leverett of 8 Ivy Way in Dartmouth. I also have a letter from, actually, it's an email from Diane Camacho, and it was sent to Michelle. I wish to voice my concerns and opposition to the proposal at 155 Old Fall River Road, both as an area resident and town meeting member. I remember when the owners acquired the Schofield Farm from the town at a very reduced price of $80,000 for farming. As such, there is an APR in the property for farming. While growing marijuana is considered farming, I am opposed to a marijuana manufacturing plant here for several reasons. One, the property clearly lies outside the town meeting approved marijuana overlay district, and except for a 500 by 500 foot area at the corner is zoned single residence B. Two, the size of an 80 by 100 square foot, 2-story steel building in close proximity to Old Fall River Road is totally out of character for this rural setting. Three, the ZBA Zoom meeting I attended on February 23rd did not have any input from the Agricultural Commission, Historical Commission, or the Community Preservation Commission, which I felt it should have. I believe if a proposal is before the ZBA, the appropriate boards, committees, and commissions with a previous involvement on the property should be contacted. Perhaps this needs to change in the future. Four, according to the Massachusetts Historical Commission in Boston, this farm, circa 1751, is listed as a historical farm and property. As such, I feel Historical Commission should have been consulted. Five, although there is no cap on marijuana manufacturing facilities, the town should be limiting such plants within the overlay district as voted on at town meeting. Would this mean that other farms in the town can also obtain ZBA variances and build marijuana manufacturing plants throughout the town? Question mark. Number 6, after reading the contents of the APR as listed in the New Bedford Registry of Deeds, book 10765, page 268, it seems to me that the Grantee Farm Bureau has not monitored the lack of progress in farming activities over the years. And it says, driving by almost daily, the farm's purchase driving by almost daily since the farm's purchase, it's been disappointing to see that the kind of farming I anticipated never really took place. Unfortunately, the farm continues to progress in disrepair from year to year. I understand farming is a difficult life, but perhaps more efforts could have been made to do traditional farming by improving the fields for agriculture. Granting this variance and allowing this historical farm in a rural part of town outside of the overlay area to become an industrial-looking marijuana manufacturing plant is not the answer. Please consider denying this proposal. Thank you, Diane M. Camacho, town meeting member, precinct 1 and area resident. I also have another letter from a Gloria Bancroft, it's dated March 7th. Dear members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, after reviewing all available documents from your office and watching the February 23rd public hearing, I respectfully submit the following concerns and questions regarding the use variance application for 155 Old Fall River Road. As a town meeting member, I recall the town's original purchase of the Schofield property for $850,000 utilizing CPA funds. The subsequent agricultural preservation restriction decision and eventual sale to the current property owner for $80,000 after a selection process. As a resident living nearby, I, along with many others, were supportive of the transactions and looked forward to seeing the young couple farm the property and perhaps open a farm stand at such a desirable high-traffic location. Unfortunately, over the years, we witnessed only some minor renovations to the single-family home, but limited farming practices. Over time, the barn has been allowed to deteriorate and property become overgrown, resulting in much disappointment to many. Now it is with great surprise that I learn of the current proposal for a use variance to allow for marijuana manufacturing. Concerns/questions. Town meeting supported the planning board's marijuana overlay district, which was thoughtfully developed, including a special permit process in addition to site plan review. This 22-acre property is zoned single residence B, except for a 500 by 500 corner zone limited industrial. Marijuana activity is not allowed in either zone as the property is not located in Dartmouth's marijuana overlay district. The argument that this property is close by to the overlay district and therefore must have been overlooked is purely speculative. The creation of the overlay district was taken seriously, thoroughly reviewed by our planning board, town council, and required a 2/3 vote of town meeting. When an amendment was sought by the select board to include Route 6 property, town meeting discussed it at length and voted no, not once, but twice. Issuing a use variance outside of the overlay district is contrary to the stated intent of Dartmouth's legislative body. Since this project is outside of the marijuana overlay district, the planning board special permit process is not required. Only a site plan review is required. The marijuana overlay district with special permit was created for a reason, and this would bypass that process. Although marijuana may be deemed agricultural per the state's guidance issued April 2021, municipal zoning must still be followed. Since the applicant would no longer live on the property and the home be converted to offices for a nonprofit corporation, this violates the farming restriction as written and the town's original intent for the land. If such intent is not enforced, this may jeopardize the future support of land preservation projects using CPA funds. The 61A restriction on the land would be removed and back taxes paid. Since there is a financial hardship claim, how will back taxes be paid? Will it be paid by the company releasing the land? Who are they? And why did they not present at the public hearing? What information do we have about the operations of the project since the applicant would not be operating the facility nor living on the property? Has the applicant truly exhausted all farming options on the property, such as greenhouse lettuce greens, as originally proposed when they bought the land? Why has there no mention of the pigs raised on the property at the public hearing? Can other animals be raised? Are the hardship claims of wet soils, limited farming months, and wild animals eating crops truly unique? Aren't these issues facing many farms and home gardeners en masse? Why weren't fences used to protect the crops from animals? How can the applicant argue that there is no impact to the community character when the proposal calls for a 2-story commercial metal building adjacent to a single residence B lands that do not mirror the existing farming landscape in that area? How can the applicant argue that there is no impact to the public good when the project would bypass the special permit process established to protect the public? The argument that your past decision to grant the use variance for a Route 6 location should support a similar decision here is not appropriate, as each application must be evaluated independently of the others with careful review of the 3 required standards. The burden of proof of these standards lies with the applicant. The planning board voiced concerns of this project as it lies outside of the overlay district. The Board of Health voiced concerns related to septic issues. The Agricultural Commission, Community Preservation Commission, and Historical Commission were also not asked to comment by your board. Why is that? Given the history of this property, why were these boards omitted from the process? Based on the numerous concerns and questions stated above, I respectfully ask that your board deny the application for a use variance. And it's signed electronically by Gloria Bancroft. I also received an email from a Margaret Mary Cabral of 909 Old Fall River Road. She's a town meeting precinct 1 member. I am a precinct 1 town meeting member and have been made aware of the situation at 155 Old Fall River Road. just to review, because I feel it is important to this issue, in 2019, when Casco Botanicals wanted to come to Dartmouth, they presented themselves to town meeting. Two different boards set up informal meetings and were willing to give a percentage back to the town, a missed opportunity. Then two designated areas were set up. However, now I and others hear through alert ears, there is a petition for a marijuana manufacturing plant at 155 Old Fall River Road, zone single residential, except a corner piece limited industrial. This is outside the designated overlay district. The property was owned by the Schofield family and the town purchased it in 2006 with CPA funds. An agricultural restriction was placed on the property to permanently keep the farm use. The APR is held by the Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau has not voted on this project. It is not in the overlay district. There are septic water concerns, and there will be town meeting concerns for use of CPA funds. These are my issues with this petition. I have seen the neighbors who live nearby and understand their concerns too. Thank you. And its response is from a Margaret Mary Cabral. Now, I also received some written comments from boards. I had previously received a letter from I already read that into the record, I believe the last hearing. This one here is, so we have an email which was addressed, I believe, to Mr. Haddad from a Brad Mitchell, who's the director of the Farm Bureau. And he wanted to clarify a letter that he had previously provided to Ms. Arsenio. And he wanted to clear, and this is what it states, and this is an email that was forwarded to Michelle Vieira from Cody Haddad. Please make it clear to the ZBA that my letter only addresses whether cannabis could legally be grown on the farm. I was under the mistaken impression that she was in early stages of exploring this project and had no specific plans. The question as to whether specific plans do so sync with the provisions of the APR and what conditions might make it allowable are a different matter. When I informed her that more review would be necessary, she asked that I send a hard copy of the letter she attached to her. I declined, stating that the foundation board would address all matters under one cover. I believe you were CC'd on this correspondence. As such, and it's in bold, as such, I would request that the ZBA for now ignore and discard my letter of February 3rd. Subsequent to board decisions, I will provide both Claudia and you with a comprehensive letter addressing all issues relative to Ms. Arsenio's proposed use and the relationship of her proposal to the APR. And he refers to a letter that's dated February 3rd, and the letter had previously stated it was in reference to property restrictions on 155 Old Fall River Road, to whom it may concern. The Massachusetts Farm Bureau Preservation Foundation Incorporated hold the restriction at 155 Old Fall River Road in Dartmouth. To our knowledge, there are no provisions in the restriction or deed which would prohibit the cultivation of cannabis or hemp at this property. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact our office. And it's signed by Brad Mitchell, who's the secretary of the clerk, I guess, of the Farm Bureau. But he's asked us not to consider that letter. I also have a letter from Chris Michaud, the Director of Public Health for our town. It says, it has been brought to the Board of Health's attention that you are considering constructing an 8,000 square foot building for a marijuana manufacturing facility at 155 Old Fall River Road. Upon further review of your sewage disposal system folder for the aforementioned location, there is a grant of restrictive covenant that states that until such time as this property is connected to the town of Dartmouth public sewer system, no building located on the property may have more than 4 bedrooms in total, and no increase in design flow without the prior written consent of the Dartmouth Board of Health. With that being said, the addition of an 8,000 square foot commercial building would be an increase in flow and would be prevented by the existing restrictive covenant. If you wish to pursue this further, you will need to submit in writing an overall proposal of the existing site conditions as well as the proposed facility. Should need further clarification, please contact our office. Signed, Christopher Michaud. I also have a letter from the Community Preservation Committee. Dear Mr. Maderas, on behalf of the Dartmouth Community Preservation Committee, CPC, I am writing to express the CPC's opposition to the request for a use variance at 155 Old Fall River Road to construct an 80 by 100-foot structure for the cultivation of marijuana. This property was originally purchased by the town of Dartmouth, and an agricultural preservation restriction was placed on the property using $850,000 in Community Preservation Act funds. The town's proposal to preserve this property for agricultural use was vetted by the CPC and recommended to town meeting as being eligible for CPA funding and consistent with the CPC annual plan that includes preservation of the agricultural character of the town. The CPC annual plan is based in part on the town of Dartmouth's master plan, which articulates the following values with respect to agricultural land. We value the rural character of our town. The farmland, coastal interface, forests, wetlands, scenic vistas, and historic coastal and countryside village centers all contribute to this shared appreciation. Progress should not diminish or detract from the features that define the nature of our town. We value traditional local industries with ties to our natural resources. Farming, fishing, and marine industries have long provided jobs for residents and rooted the community with a harmonious relationship with the land and sea. These industries should be supported. Dartmouth would not be the same without them. The CPC recommended the use of CPA funds for this property with these values in mind and with the intent that the agricultural use and landscape of the property be preserved. This was the CPC's representation to town meeting when warrant Article 12 was presented for town meeting approval on June 6, 2006. On March 1st, 2022, the CPC discussed the proposed use variance for the property. It is the opinion of the CPC that the proposed use variance would not be consistent with the spirit or intent of the CPA funds originally granted to the town of Dartmouth to preserve the agricultural land and character of the property through the acquisition of an agricultural preservation restriction. The proposed structure would diminish and detract from the rural character of the property. It would not represent traditional local farming of the land. Therefore, the CPC believes the proposed variance would alter the property's agricultural character and use in ways that would be contrary to the original intent for securing an APR. Further, the proposed variance would not be consistent with the town's land use values that are referenced above. Respectfully submitted, Howard Baker Smith, Chairman of the Dartmouth Community Preservation Committee. And this letter was also CC'd to the Massachusetts Farm Bureau. All right, I want to thank everyone for bearing with me. I think that both the letters in support warranted merit in being read so that they were read into the record as part of tonight's hearing, as well as the letters in opposition and also the board letters either making recommendations or suggesting an opposition. So at this point in time, I'm going to call
Michael.
upon my-
Mr. Chair, yeah,
Michael, excuse me.
Yes.
Did you read the letter from the agricultural?
Commission,
Committee? And also, you did not read Cody Haddad, the Director of Development letter last meeting?
I didn't. Well,
No.
unfortunately, I don't have both of those letters. So I'm
Oh.
going to have one of my fellow
Helene?
members read it into the record.
Yes.
Helene, could you read both of them into the record, please?
yes, I do have an email here that was sent to Michelle. And this is from the Dartmouth Agriculture Commission. And it's dated Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. And it says, this subject is use variance for 155 Old Fall River Road. At its meeting on March 2nd, the Dartmouth Agriculture Commission voted unanimously not to support Claudia Arsenio's application for a variance to allow for a cannabis production operation at 155 Old Fall River Road. The commission supports agricultural endeavors that can enhance a farm's income, but felt this proposal has too many uncertainties. The Dartmouth Town Meeting voted to create an overlay district specifically for the wholesale production of cannabis so that those operations would be away from residential and school areas and only licensed one for wholesale production. That license has already been granted, and therefore this proposal would be in violation of the town's vote. In addition, the constantly changing regulations on cannabis production make it difficult to interpret what is currently allowed and what may be allowed in the future. Until these questions can be addressed by the town, we request the ZBA deny this application for a variance. Respectfully submitted, Dartmouth Agricultural Commission. For Cody, I think I have it from the original application. Let me see if I can find a copy of it here. If not, I think Cody's here with us tonight if he has a copy of it.
Yeah, sure, Halim. I can read it into the record if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if we may have Mr. Haddad read his letter to the board.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
Before I read it into the record, I do want to mention, this is not a letter in support or a letter in opposition. This is
Correct.
just more providing factual information to the board. So as Director of Development, I don't have a official stance on this, but
Cody,
The-
Cody, I'm just
the-
having some difficulty hearing you. I don't know what it is. It's like it comes in and out.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so the letter states, as you may be aware, an application has been submitted for a use variance for the subject property of 155 Old Fall River Road, Dartmouth, Mass. This property has an agricultural preservation deed restriction, APR, which is held by the Farm Bureau. The petitioner, Ms. Claudia Arsenio, is seeking relief in order to build and operate a marijuana cultivation facility at the subject property. In speaking with the town's legal counsel, should the zoning board of appeals find that the applicant meets the statutory requirements, I am recommending that the zoning board of appeals condition any granting of the use variance on obtaining Farm Bureau approval for the proposed use. Additionally, approximately 75% of the property is in the single residence B district, which is not eligible for a use variance. So both the application and the decision would have to be clear about which portion of the property the variance is for. I would also note that whether the criteria for a variance is even met is questionable, given that they are simply asking to undertake a different type of farming from what is already occurring. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me directly.
Thank you. Are there any other letters that we need to read into the record? Michelle?
That's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
so now I'm going to turn to our members of the board. You guys have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make at this time?
Yes,
I
Mr.
don't have
Chair.
any questions at this time. I think I'd rather hear from Attorney Manning first and some of the attendees tonight, I mean, the public, before I ask my question.
And I think Dr. Agai wants to make a comment. I think at the last hearing, I made it publicly known that he was recusing himself. I don't know if he wants to renew that. Is that what you wanted to say, Dr.
That is
Agai?
correct, Mr.
All
Chair.
right, so for the record, Dr. Agai is renewing his notice that he is recusing himself from making any decision on this matter. He's only an alternate tonight anyway, but it's always best to make that known. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Agai.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess at this time, I'm going to call upon the petitioner's counsel, Attorney Manning, to provide us any updated information he may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have received a supplemental memorandum that I emailed to your clerk today. I believe it was distributed amongst you.
I did.
Addressing some issues. Thank you. Let me emphasize something again. I don't know, by hearing these letters, I don't think a lot of people are grasping the concept here. If you grant this use variance, that does not mean we're going to have a cannabis facility within the next couple of days. This is just the first step in a long, and it's going to be a long, arduous process. We have to go to the planning board for site plan review. We have to deal with the Board of Health and any issues they have, which they've raised regarding septics or connections to sewers. We have to go to the building department and satisfy the building department in terms of the structure being built. We have to get permission from the Farm Bureau under our APR. We also have to obtain a host community agreement with the town and the proper licensing. So this is not by any means the end of the game. This is just actually the beginning of the game, and it's the first step in the process that we have to go through. When we were here last time, we had a discussion about the special permit criteria in the overlay district. And it was Mr. Haddad that pointed out that I guess town council has determined that if we get the use variance, we don't have to comply or obtain with the special permit under the overlay district regulations. I was working on the assumption that once we got the special permit, it made it a permitted use, and we had to do that, go through that process. So that's why we asked, we came back this time tonight in order to address the criteria of the overlay district. There are actually 7 of them, as stated in section 3.375-4-4 of your bylaws, and they are the standards for the granting of a special permit within the overlay district. The first is, and I'm going to paraphrase, the first is that the marijuana establishment basically must meet all the dimensional requirements of your bylaws. Attached to my supplemental memo is a plan marked Exhibit A from Prime Engineering, and Mr. Rayum is present if you have any questions. What that plan shows is that the proposed structure, in fact, does meet all the dimensional requirements. It has well more than enough frontage for the building. It will not exceed the height restriction of 60 feet or 3 stories. It will not come close to the maximum lot coverage. The side and rear setbacks are 25 feet. We have over 800 on the, that'd be the western side, and I believe a couple of hundred on the eastern side. And the front yard, we just squeaked by, we're on the plan. We have 50.1 feet frontage, front yard setback with 50 required. So pursuant to this plan, it shows that we meet every one of the dimensional requirements as proposed. I also want to clarify a couple of letters. There were a few references about there only being a 500 by 500 small parcel that's not zone residential. That's not accurate. And you can see that right on Exhibit A. What we keep calling the infrastructure envelope is actually 1.5 acres, and that whole parcel is zoned light industrial. The remainder of the property is zoned Residence B. Everything that's being proposed is within that infrastructure envelope, which is the light industrial zoning district. The second criteria is that we cannot be located within 1,000 feet of another marijuana establishment located within the town. I didn't measure this off accurately, but the only facilities that I'm aware of that's been approved in the town is the retail facility on Route 6 and the cultivating plant and the old Dartmouth indoor courts, both of which are located near Route 6 and Reed Road. Just from driving there, I know that's at least 7 or 8 miles from our location. So I would submit we will not be closer than 1,000 feet to either one of them, and there are no other existing ones. The big question was raised at the last meeting was whether or not we meet the criteria number 3, which is that we can't be within 500 feet of an existing public or private school, college or university, daycare, library, any facility in which children commonly congregate, or a residence. Again, you have attached to my memo a plan from Prime Engineering as Exhibit B. It's by this plan done through, it's my understanding it's called geo mapping. He is showing the distance between our facility location in accordance with the regs from the point closest to the next building, showing the distance from all the surrounding areas. Every one of them is well over 500 feet, with the exception of the property located, it would be the southeasterly corner of the intersection of Fons Corner Road and Old Fall River Road. It's 379 feet from that structure, but in that structure is a variety store and a towing company, Dartmouth Towing Complete Auto Repair. So by this map, and again, if you have any direct questions about the map, I'm sure Mr. Rayum can address it, but it shows that we are not within 500 feet of any of the prohibited types of structures under the overlay district standards. The fourth requirement is that outdoor fencing be non-reflective earth tone color, such as black or dark green. The plan does, on Exhibit A, does show the location of a proposed fence. The type of fence, the size of the fence, the color of the fence would all be hashed out at site plan review before your planning board. But I would submit that my client will, of course, comply with any restrictions in order to be in compliance with the overlay district bylaw. So it would be non-reflective. It would be of an earth tone color in accordance with the directions of your planning board. There are also then number 5 have that parking restrictions at the establishment have to comply with Article 24 of your Article 24, excuse me, of your bylaws. And again, that is one of the steps involved with site plan review. We do have an area designated driveway parking area. It's not even known at this point, really, the exact number of employees that were going to be needed to properly farm the facility. So I think by the time we get to planning board, that'll be something hashed out as part of the site plan review, as it typically is, both the number and the location of parking. The 6th requirement is that no special permit can issue for a marijuana facility engages in the sale of on-site consumption until it passes town meeting with the voters of the town. This is a cultivation facility. There will be no on-site consumption, so therefore it doesn't apply. Lastly, it says that no special permit may be issued for a given type of marijuana establishment once the town has reached the maximum number of that type that it is obligated to allow in accordance with 94G Section 3. And I believe Mr. Haddad addressed this at the last meeting, that it has not been, the minimum has not been established yet for the town, with one other facility being only one other facility in town. We submit that we're in compliance with that as well. So that addresses all of the issues that are to be considered under a special permit by the planning board in the overlay district, and that are relevant to our case. The other thing, before you grill me with any questions you have, I can't emphasize enough. In hearing these letters, everyone keeps talking about, well, you know, cannabis production as if it's something other than agricultural. Growing a cannabis plant is an agricultural endeavor. It's not something unique or something different. It sounds more like, and a few of the letters even mentioned it, that, yeah, it's a non-traditional type of agricultural endeavor, but it is agricultural. You can't emphasize that enough. People seem to take umbrage with the fact that we can't farm the rest of the property. I mean, the woman has tried as hard as she can to farm, but when you have 16 acres of wetlands, as those letters attest to, you can't make a go of it. I know it's going to look different than your traditional farm. You're not going to go by and see rows of corn stalks and scarecrows in the field. You're going to see a building, but it's no different than the one woman who suggested, geez, why don't you build a greenhouse and do some traditional type of vegetables in there? Well, it's got to the point where it's not affordable to do that. And this type of crop and agricultural endeavor is necessary. And that goes to the financial hardship we discussed at length at the last meeting. The last thing I'm going to point out is that everyone seems concerned about the fact that the town paid $800,000 for the property and then put it into the restriction. It went out to bid. It was put out to bid. My client was the highest bidder and bought it for $80,000. But she has since then invested well over $300,000. That's what she's got for a loan, trying to make a go of this, repairing the residence. Somebody said they didn't see much difference in the residence. Well, when she bought the property, there wasn't even copper piping in there. The place had been stripped. She had to completely rebuild the building. She's done everything she can without any grant money. There's no federal grant money under this APR. She doesn't have the funds to reconstruct the barn. And that barn was in deplorable condition when she bought it. And she can tell you, if you'd like, the thing is held together by chains when she came into this endeavor. They made a go of it. They tried it the best they can with the limited resources that this land offers. So what do? Well, we don't sit here and rely on tradition and for no other reason other than the fact that it's always been done that way. No, we say, let's offer a change. Let's go with a non-traditional agricultural use and make this a viable farm property once again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you. Well pled. So gentlemen, do you have any questions or comments for Mr. Manning at this time?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Attorney Manning. If we can go back to the Farm Bureau, I mean, we know your next step from here is to go for site plan review with the planning board, correct? How's the Farm Bureau involved with this? Because we have some conflicting information. I think we did have something from the Farm Bureau first saying, yeah, you're okay. Then they say, well, we need to run it by the board or something. Are you required to, what are you required to have from the Farm Bureau? Any restriction on the APR or the ANR, APR, I believe, right?
Yes, we, APR. I included a copy of the APR in my original memo. You have the full APR, which is recorded in the Registry of Deeds. And the Farm Bureau does have to approve it, okay? But I think what happened is, just to clarify with the letters, my client inquired, first of all, whether her initial inquiry was, is cannabis production allowed under this APR? Because if it was a federal APR, it's prohibited. You can't have cannabis production, but this is not a federal APR. So she made the inquiry. It was told initially in that initial letter said, yes, cannabis production would be allowed. And what he was clarifying, I think, is that when he saw that we had introduced that letter to show that we had checked on it, that he's not saying they've approved it yet. And it simply says that that they have to approve it. So as part of the process, going and planning, we have to go to Farm Bureau. We do have to get approval. And as I've emphasized every time, if we fail at any one of those other boards, it's fatal to the project. It's not like we can sidestep the Farm Bureau and get around them. No, they have to approve it, and we think they will, because again, it is an agricultural use of the property. So yeah, it's going to be part of the process, and I think that the gentleman who wrote the letter just didn't want to be speaking for the full board as to this specific proposal until they had reviewed it and actually approved it.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, Ed. No more questions.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay.
I remember that we had a hearing at one point with an issue about two facilities on Fons Corner Road being within 1,000 feet of each other. But I don't remember exactly where the second facility was that's already been approved. How close is that facility to this property? Does anybody know?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know that Attorney Manning said he only knew of one, but you're right, there is another one. I knew that there was another one.
It's definitely over 1,000 feet, and Mr. Braga is here. He can tell us. This is north of the south of the Dunkin' Donuts on Fons Corner Road, and that's probably, it's gotta be, my guess, at least a mile or half a mile away from that. But Mr. Braga is here. I think he can probably answer this one.
I would probably say thank you. I would probably say it's at least that distance, but again, that's not verified in any documents that they have provided. So again, I don't have an exact distance. So, I mean, I think that should have been put on, because one of the requirements is to show how far away you are by either a line showing north, south, east, or west. And I think that should have been denoted on the plan. I don't have that. I really don't have that distance.
All right.
Okay.
So at this point in time, I'm going to I'm going to open up the public hearing to any other individuals who are in support of this petition. So at this time, I'm going to call upon anyone out in the audience who has and who would like to state anything in support of this application.
I would like to add some color and statement of support for the project, if I might.
Certainly, if you could just state your name and your address, please.
Yes, my name is John Buckley. I'm the architect representing Claudia. I did the schematic design studies for the building and have been, talking to her about the project itself.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate a couple points here. One is there are multi steps to this process, and it's my understanding. I know this is a kind of a hot button topic in that it's a cannabis farm, but it's my understanding there's kind of 3 points for the ZBA to be looking at a project, and typically those are regular lot size, soil, and economic hardship. And we've certainly displayed 2 of those points, soil and economic hardship. And then a second point is the proposal is largely aesthetically the same. So formally, there is a barn on the property that's dilapidated. We're proposing to replace that with a barn of a similar size and of a similar height. We're proposing a building that's about 45 feet tall, which is well within the limits of the dimensional requirements. And formally, we can treat this thing to look like a barn. I know we've said that it's a pre-engineered metal building, but we've got a lot of leeway to make this thing, look good and in the character of the area. And that's our full intention. So, I would hope just my statement would be to assuage some of the fears that we're going to have something that all of a sudden looks very different than what is there now, because that's not the case at all. I'd also like to just revisit some of the improvements that Claudia intends to do with the property. This is all based on revenue. Like, if she's able to farm this and start bringing in revenue, which she hasn't been able to do, there's improvements to the property that I think are very relevant to the town. I mean, one of the things that was referenced last year in the last meeting was rehabbing the other barn on the property and make it available for local farmers for free of charge for a farm stand. And I think that plays into almost everybody's idea of a lovely community. And that's in addition to a host of other improvements, including improvements to the what's currently non-arable land on the bulk of the property. And I think it should be reinforced that all of the work that's being proposed here is within the industrial overlay of the property itself. And the rest of the property, which might be designated residential in terms of zoning, but it actually can't be built on because of the farm APR. One other point is in regards to the Farm Bureau, there was initial support for the cultivation of cannabis as a crop. The issue, and I think the reason why that support was put on pause, it was not retracted, it was put on pause, because there was some unclarity about where that crop was happening. Was it on this part of the property, or was it in the industrial part of the property? Would affect the way in which the Farm Bureau looks at their kind of responsibility to the land. And so that's what's under review with the Farm Board. And I think in the end, we're not trying to impinge in any way on that farmland, because we're going to be doing this work within the context of an existing footprint of a barn. So, and I think all of these things should be, taken in and really understood, because the nature of the project is one that A, does not significantly change the characteristic of the property. B, it is substantial improvements, and that's built on top of, I would say, fulfilling some of the 7 requirements for a special permit within the district, then also just typical, requirements for proving bad soil and economic hardship for a typical, zoning hearing. So, you know, I hope I've pled my case. I know that we would work very hard to create something that's appropriate for the town. And I think Claudia's put a good team in place. There's tons of questions to answer. We have to go before a lot of people, and we recognize that. And you know, we're looking forward to do so, but we need to make these steps forward. And so that's what we're asking today.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr.
Is there a-
Chair, if I may?
Yes,
I just looked up the location of the Dunkin' Donuts in relation to the 155 Old Fall River Road. It tells me it's about 0.8 miles that's driving, but I think if you to draw a line, that's almost like 4,000 feet. Just to answer Mr. Human, it's not a map, it's not a stamp by an engineer or a surveyor, just to give you roughly a understanding how far the other facility is from 155 Old Fall River Road. Thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a statement or put forth any comments in support of this application? Mr. Manise, is there anyone out there?
Hello.
Yes.
Okay,
Hello, my name is Sonia Bradford and I live at 191 Hicksville Road. I'm a resident close by, and I would really like to see Claudia have the opportunity as a female farmer in Dartmouth to apply at least for this cannabis cultivation license. It's a viable agricultural crop, and there's no reason that she shouldn't be able to apply, in my opinion. She'll have to go through the process with her architects and with all the departments in Dartmouth, and they will guide her in the right direction. I have faith in the town and the departments that everyone will do the right thing, and that we will have an industry, or she will have a viable crop in town without it being a detriment to anyone in our community. It'll only be a positive thing for us, as far as I'm concerned.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment in support? Mr. Manise, is there anyone else out there?
Mr. Chair, I do not see anybody.
All right, so I'm gonna shift this now. If there's anyone that's in opposition to this petition, I'd ask that you come forth and present your comments. Mr. Manise, is there anyone out there?
Yes, we have three.
Okay. Whoever would like to go first. Who?
Susan Caducci.
Okay, if we could have Susan come forward. State your name and address, please.
My name is Susan Guiducci. My address is 215 Bakerville Road,
Okay,
and I am a member of the Agricultural Commission. And at the time of the purchase of the property through CPC funding, I was also the chair of the Ag Preservation Trust Fund Council. And everyone is correct in that the couple did supply a proposal for this property, and the proposal was accepted, and this was also one of, I believe, 2 or 3 other proposals. And we chose the one that showed the most promise. And I'm going to remind everyone again that the CPC put forward $850,000 for that property, plus an additional $25,000 to replace the septic. And Claudia and her husband purchased that property for $80,000. And we accepted that proposal because we wanted to see a young couple in there with lots of promise who were willing to take on this property with all its challenges, which they were made fully aware of. I have a binder that includes a 1, 2, and 3-year plan submitted by them to make certain improvements on that property, very few of which were completed. And you have also received that comment by some of the neighbors that drive by that property on a regular basis. I'm going to remind everyone that Claudia will not be doing the growing at that facility. There was also a comment made by Mr. Buckley that this two-story barn is going to look very much the same as any other agricultural, any building on any other agricultural property in town. And I'm going to say that that is not true. We have not seen two-story buildings in use for agriculture since poultry was raised in confinement in the 60s and 70s. So that is totally erroneous. And I guess that's probably the extent of my comments at this time, although I would suggest that well, again, this is going to go back to Farm Bureau, but if you go back and review the preservation restriction, you may want to take a look at what's permissible in the infrastructure envelope listed on page 4, item number 3, which says that the house, that it has to be a residential purposes only for the house. So in essence, that house may not be converted to offices.
Can I just hold you, excuse me?
And she can't live there anyway because the house is too close to the manufacturing facility. That's all, or closer than the 500, it has to be 500 feet away.
All right, excuse me. How do you pronounce your last name again?
Guiducci.
Guiducci. Can you refer me back to, what page was it again? Page 3?
Page 4, item number 3.
Page 4, item number 3. All right.
That's the ag preservation restriction held by the Farm Bureau. And as much as, and I'm going to talk while you're looking at that, Michael, as much as we are in support of most types of agriculture, including cannabis, it does not belong on this piece of property because of what the original intent was of the town.
So at this point, at this time, I'm going to pose a question. Are you done, Ms. Guiducci?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Attorney Manning.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So obviously, I'm sure you're familiar with what the language is in paragraph 3, page 4.
Yes.
All right. Well, I will say this. I understand that you have a lot of hurdles that you need to confront. But it always been, and I've been sitting on this board for some time now, it's always been a practice of this board, given that we have a quasi judicial character board, that we don't grant relief when we're going to be in direct contravention to some covenant or restriction that's of record. I know that that's been a practice of this board for some time. And quite frankly, given that there is a specific restriction for this particular infrastructure area of the infrastructure envelope area, that it's only for a single family residential purposes, then I just find it somewhat difficult for us, at least I myself, to move forward with this type of an impediment.
Well, I disagree with such a limited interpretation of section 3. It's talking about the residential structure that's on there, which we're gonna need the Farm Bureau to approve if it's gonna be used as an office. If it's not, what we're talking about is making use of the accessory structures or the actually what they call the appurtenant structures. It refers to the garage. Well, it's a barn in this case. And what we're planning on, what we're seeking is change the use of that barn. If the Farm Bureau doesn't allow us to use the office for use the residence for a nonprofit, then that might alter our plans and we might have to demolish the structure. But again, we're trying to do something that is both viable to the community as well as appropriate under the APR. So depending on how the Farm Bureau feels about that is the way we'd have to go. But your approval of a use variance is not going to directly contradict a restriction of record.
I mean, I'll just read this into the record. It's paragraph 3, page 4. Within infrastructure envelope, the construction, use, maintenance, repair, and replacement for single-family residential purposes only of one single-family residence, together with an access drive and parking and appropriate appurtenant structures, such as a garage, swimming pool, and fencing, and including gardening and landscaping incidental to use, as well as buildings or structures for agricultural purposes. So I believe that your interpretation is that this last provision here, as well as buildings or structures for agricultural purposes, is what you feel is the exception. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And I'll just finish reading. To the extent permitted by applicable zoning, restricted area may also include an appurtenant guest house or guest apartment. Any new construction shall be subject to the prior written notification to the grantee as provided in section C thereof and yield no enhancement benefit from restriction area. All right, so the rest of that doesn't really address what we're dealing with. I just wanted to make sure that the viewers at home had some context as to what points were being made by Mrs. Guducci. So gentlemen, is there anything you'd like to add as to this particular issue, Al or Halim?
So it's gonna go back to the Farm Bureau and correct in regards to that use of because if we, let's say the bond is approved, then that structure cannot be used as the residential structure. Because you can't be within 500 feet of a residential structure.
Well, that's not their requirement. That's our requirement in order to grant a permit. Assuming they would get relief from us, they would have to convert that residential structure to be accommodating for some other type of use other than residential.
But within the structure itself, is there, I mean, would they have to revise the restriction on the this has to do with the existing structure that is on the site right now, correct?
Well, it says you can have that. That's what this provision is saying, that within that infrastructure envelope, you can have a single family residence. So you could construct a single family residence if you wanted to. But what would happen is, in order for them to be able to conduct their operation there in accordance with their application, they would have to then convert that from a residential use to some other type of use.
I understand. Okay.
Consistent with obviously the light industrial zoning provisions. All right, let's see if anyone else has any comments. Is there anyone else? Well, I'm sorry, I didn't give Attorney Human. I didn't give Attorney.
No, I'm
Human
fine right now.
You're fine, okay. Is there anyone else in opposition that would like to make a comment?
Michelle Keith.
Hi, guys. Claudia, I feel very, very badly that this hasn't worked out for you. I'm very sorry about that. And I feel very badly that the town spent, well, all those CPC funds were spent, 850,000, almost $1 million to preserve the farm. Everybody was rooting for you. Everybody was on your side. And I think it's a very, very sad situation. What I'm most concerned about, though, and it's been a really hot issue in the town, everybody gets all worked up about it, is this marijuana overlay district. You know, and I just don't see, I'm not an expert on zoning, but how can the zoning board vote to do this when it's not in the overlay district? So that's my concern. I think it's going to cause a lot of turmoil in the town. And I'd like to see, like, are there any sort of statutory guidelines or legal precedent for this? Has this happened anywhere else in the state where these types of funds have been spent and a farm has been rezoned, you know, the zoning has been changed contrary to what town meeting has voted for, which is the marijuana overlay district is where the marijuana will be grown. So I'm just concerned. I'm sorry, Claudia, that it hasn't worked out.
Thank you, Mrs. Keith.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment?
We have a John.
John, please state your name and address, please.
John Souza, 674 Fisher Road. I like to go on record as opposition to this application. I'm not in opposition of the cultivation of marijuana. I'm in opposition of the cultivation of marijuana outside the overlay district. I find it ironic that the attorney and the architect both stated that their intent is to follow all the rules and regulations in the town of Dartmouth, that this process has only begun, and they have a long process to go to different boards and committees to get approval. And I find it ironic that right out of the gate, that they're not doing the right thing by putting this use in the overlay district. The right thing to do, folks, is to put this in the overlay district that town meeting approved a number of years ago, and in only that district. And a few other points. I'm also a member of the CPC, and I was on the CPC. I've been on for a number of years. I was on the CPC in 2006 when we approved this and recommended this go forward to town meeting. And the intent of the CPC back then, we did this in other farms, was to, we all know that farming or the purchase of the farm because of the value of the land for residential purpose farmers can't afford it. And this was one of them. So the intent was to purchase the property and make this affordable to a young local farmer who can make a go out of it, who normally couldn't afford to spend $850,000 for a piece of property. The intent was to give them the opportunity to farm it and preserve the rural character of Dartmouth. So with that intent, the CPC has set up a number of criteria when we do this, and that is restrictions, deed restrictions, and so forth, and also set up a building envelope for the farmer to have a house on the farm. So, you know, we want the farm to be preserved, but we want the farmer to be able to live there and farm the property. So that was done on this property. This was 22 acres. It was all one lot. The CPC, we carved out, I think it was over an acre lot for the residents to be used for residential purposes only, and that the remaining land would have the APR restriction that no residents, we bought the rights for residents to be built on that and put on the APR restriction that would be farmed in perpetuity. I want to state, well, let me go further on to the state, the building envelope. If you look at that section you referred to, the infrastructure envelope, It states, clearly states, for single-family residential purposes only. It's not meant for agricultural barns, although a barn exists on it. That was grandfathered. It was pre-existing when we set up the building envelope. But if you look at our other restriction at other farms and on this one, in fact, in that same page, if you look at section 2, construction of buildings related to agricultural purposes are to be done in the restricted area. And the restricted area is where the farming occurs. So we want the farmer to be profitable and to have accessory uses. And if they need a barn, if they need a greenhouse, to do that on the farm, not on the residential building envelope. Very clear, in my opinion. And if it's not clear, that certainly was the intent. I know I was there, and we've done this a number of other locations throughout town. So I don't think they're meeting the spirit of the law or the intent, but certainly what was presented to town meeting. I'll go back to Sue Caducci's comments that, the town invested over $875,000 into this property with the intent of having these restrictions, preserving the farm, preserving the character of the neighborhood, preserving the historic barn that existed there, preserving the historic residence that existed there, preserving the 4 corners. The other 3 corners are all in APR, except obviously where the convenience store is. But all the land behind that and the other 3 corners are all in APR. So our intent was to preserve the historical character and the farming community of Dartmouth. This industrial building that proposing does not do that. And I'm stating the restriction doesn't allow it. If the Farm Bureau approves it, I hope the Board of Appeals still doesn't grant this variance. Secondly, I also served on the planning board for a number of years. I was on the planning board when we proposed the overlay district. And I was disturbed to see in the application, it states that, and they're referring to the overlay district, its exclusion seems to be an oversight for this property. I'm telling you, I sat on the board. I was part of the board that proposed the overlay district to town meeting. It was not an oversight. Our intention is the boundaries are the boundaries. The overlay district is probably 1,500, 2,000 feet away from this property. It was not an oversight. I am sympathetic to Claudia and her not being able to farm. But again, I go back to the intent of the CPC and why we created these type of situations is to give farmers the opportunity to farm in perpetuity. If they couldn't make it happen, if they failed for whatever reason, health, age, that the property, because it's no longer zoned residential, its value is greatly diminished, that the property gets passed on as affordable again. The farm and the house, that it remain an affordable house for the next farmer to try to make a go out of it. And, as Sue stated, the process was a lengthy process. Claudia and her husband knew exactly what they were getting into when they bought this farm. I'm sorry they couldn't make a go out of it. But they claim they had farming experience. If you look at their application, I call it almost like a business plan, what their intent, what they were going to do with their property. Obviously, they couldn't make that happen, but I find it ironic that the application is stating that this property is no longer farmable, that it's a tough piece of property to farm. But in the application, they state they're going to abandon the residential use. That wasn't the CPC's intent, but that they're going to abandon the residential use and put a nonprofit in that building with the intent of the nonprofit to farm the farm. You can't have it both ways, folks. On one hand, you're stating the farm's not farmable. And on the other hand, oh, we're gonna let a nonprofit go in there and let them farm it. It's unfortunate they couldn't farm it, but I believe, even though we've heard from a couple of other farmers, that's been a farm from 1751. So in my opinion, it is farmable. We've just got to get the right folks in there to farm it. And again, it's unfortunate that they couldn't make a go out of it, but that's, in my opinion, doesn't constitute a hardship to grant this variance. This type of use, this industrial building, could be put in the overlay district in an area where there are no farming soils. This would be a travesty to have this building go in where we've got some good soils. Again, is it agricultural? Technically, absolutely. It's farming, it's agricultural, but the state only allows this to be grown indoors. It can't be grown in the fields. So this can be put in a brownfield, this can be put in a paved area or an area that's already being developed. These kind of uses should not be going in existing historic farms that the town paid $875,000 to preserve a corner in perpetuity. I dispute what was saying by the architect and the lawyer that this building fits in the character. I'm sorry, folks. That's not what I envision this area to look like. I don't think anybody who drives by there every day would appreciate a metal building 2 stories high, 16,000 square feet on a corner that's been a historic barn and historic house for decades. Let's see, I believe that's it at this time. Those are my comments. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition?
I believe that's me.
Yes, please identify yourself with your name and address.
My name's Maurice Lemieux. I live on 287 Collins Corner Road. I'm a town meeting member, and I want to express my disapproval of this grow facility. It's outside of the overlay district. That in itself should be enough for the zoning board to not approve this project. You've already talked about 3 other facilities in town that either have or are going to have permission to grow marijuana. How many more do they plan on sticking in this part of town? If you allow this farm to grow marijuana in this commercial building, it's going to set a precedent for other farming land to be converted into these commercial buildings. I did send a letter in late in the day today, and that's probably why it wasn't get read into the meeting. But I just wanted to just read a portion of it. This is going to be a manufacturing a facility in a steel building with traffic concerns, noise. You're growing marijuana plants indoors. There's going to have to be a lot of fans and such to help the plants get strong. There's going to be traffic in and out of this facility already on a busy road, busy intersection there. They're even talking about possibly putting lights there now because of the traffic from the old Forest Road coming into the Fons Corner Road. There's going to be probably outdoor lighting in excess, too much lighting already in this part of town. And then the other thing is this fence they're talking about, big fence surrounding the property, not in characteristics with the neighborhood. And let's see. So as a town meeting member, we voted to have these restrictions and stuff, and if they're going to go and have these, have the town zoning board of appeals approve this, then why even have the other, okay, so that's all I gotta say on that. I just want to say that I'm not in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Is there anyone else in opposition?
We have a Richard.
Hello, this is Richard.
Richard.
Can you hear-
What's your last name? I'm sorry.
This is Richard Aruda, 405 Collins Corner Road.
Okay.
I was on the last meeting and I asked a question. I believe on the last meeting, they said they were going to build a 8,000 square foot building. And earlier, the architect spoke to the fact that the building would be put inside of the original footprint of the building that's presently there. I just wanted to know if you knew what size the building is that's presently there now, because I believe it's substantially smaller than 8,000 square feet.
All right. We can ask that question, but if you could just move on, we'll get that answered at some point. Richard Aruda? Mr. Aruda, is that the only point that you wanted to make? Mr. Manise, if you can let him back in.
No, yeah, he did. He just let me back in. No, that's the only point I had right now. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get that answered at some point. Okay, Mr. Aruda? Is there anyone else in opposition? Mr. Manise, is there anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I don't see anybody.
I see a lot of other names. All right, if there's no one else in opposition, so at this time, I'm gonna see if we can get that question answered. Attorney Manning, I guess Mr. Aruda was questioning whether or not the new building is gonna be constructed within the same footprint of the existing barn.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't measure off the barn because frankly, I didn't think it was safe enough to get close to it. So I defer to Mr. Buckley, who can probably attest to the fact of the size of the existing structure.
Okay.
I'm afraid I don't have a perfect answer for you, but because I don't have the measurements in front of me, but I do believe that the frontage is 80 feet, and it's the depth of the new building that extends into there's a series of outbuildings attached to the existing barn. So it's not exactly in the footprint of the existing barn, but I believe the frontage is, and as the property goes towards the rear, as the building goes towards the rear, it starts to chew into some undeveloped land, but it's not any further than some other accessory bits and pieces that are back there.
So your argument is collectively with the other structures, it falls within the same confines.
That's right, and I would qualify it as it's not substantially different than what is there.
Okay.
Certainly from the street front.
All right, but taking a little interpretation of what was represented, then I understand where Mr. Aruda is coming from. All right. Members of the board, is there anything that you would like to ask at this time or comment on?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I keep going back to page 4.3 of the APR, and after hearing Mr. Souza's testimony, my understanding is the intention was to create the infrastructure envelope for one single residential dwelling, correct? Yeah, I guess this is for Attorney Manning. Is that correct? the intention was to create the infrastructure envelope to support a one residential structure or one residential dwelling with the garage and the pool and all that stuff. So,
Well, I can't speak to the intent of what was, all I can speak to is the way this restriction is drafted. And I agree, it's limited to a single family residence as well as buildings or structures for agricultural purpose. That's what the barn is. That's the building or structure for agricultural purpose. And that's what the proposed facility is going to be as well.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Let me ask a question, Mr. Manning. Is there any reason why your client, and maybe you may not have an answer to this, but is there any reason why your client decided to place this at the same location of the existing barn rather than just raising the existing barn and placing this? Because it appears based on the restriction, you can place it within the restricted area upon approval of Farm Bureau.
Well, I think one of the, if you want to ask her directly, I have no problem with that. But I think one of the issues is the barn is collapsing. As I told you, when she purchased the property, it was already in a deplorable condition. During the recent winter storms, one of the walls collapsed. So in order, we don't have any federal grant money to repair the barn. The idea is we can get rid of this hazard as it stands right now and replace it with a well-constructed structure and conduct the agricultural activities within it. If you want, Claudia is dying to tell you about it. So why don't you,
Mr. Menezes, if you could let her in. If you could just state your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Claudia Arsenio, and I live at 155 Old Fall River Road. I chose that location because it was my understanding that I could build in the infrastructure envelope and that would be a lot more appealing to the town than to actually have me use the APR land, because it's not on the protected farmland, it's just on the infrastructure envelope. And since I'm tearing a building down to replace it with another one, I thought that would be a more appealing and actually make more sense because I'm not actually taking away from any of the land. To me, it made, it was more logical that way, but I mean, I have plenty of other land if the Farm Bureau would rather that I actually use the protected farmland, but this building is not going, I mean, it is for agricultural use, so it's still for farming purposes, but it's within the infrastructure envelope, which I thought would be more appealing. And it was my understanding that that is where buildings were allowed to be put up. And because the footprint was always already there, I thought, why not take this building down and it's easier access, the electric's already there, just seemed like the best place to put it. And I want to preserve the APR. That's important to me. I don't want the farmland to go to waste. It is difficult to farm, but there's about 2 acres that I can work with. And that's where the nonprofit would come in because, it's not enough to farm and sustain yourself and make changes. But if you're a nonprofit, you're not depending on that money to, for your livelihood and it's being supported by the cannabis, then I am able to increase the production on the farm by having financial support for equipment and infrastructure and stuff. So everyone keeps talking about how much money the town paid for this a really long time ago, but that doesn't really change what's happening on the property right now. And I mean, I think someone basically suggested that it's too bad I should just leave. And that's, I have been building this place up for the last 10 years. I've put a lot into this place and I'm still just a farmer trying to farm a crop. It's no different than what I've been doing, except this crop will actually help me sustain this place and make all the improvements that I need to do that I'm not going to be able to afford to do any other way. And Susan mentioned that I'm not farming. I am going to be farming the cannabis. I have a master cultivator that I'm not going to rely on myself to make mistakes. I'm going to be working with someone to make sure that it is done properly, but it's still farming. It's just, it changes the way that maybe the intention of the farm back when it was placed in APR, but cannabis wasn't legal then. We've come a long way, and variances have been given outside of the marijuana overlay district. So where do we, and other farmers, most farmers are not allowed to grow cannabis because they're prohibited from when there's federal money on their APRs. Like, I have a unique opportunity that most people don't have. And I don't know what else I'm not really sure what else to do. I thought it would be, a great thing to take that barn down and put a building. I mean, across the street at the farm, they have a metal building on their property. It's the same building that I'm trying to put up. It's metal buildings are agricultural buildings. If you go, and look at farms, a lot of them have metal buildings up on their facilities. They're very common. It might not have been what the town set out for the place, but it's really not going to change the final outcome of the project. It's only going to help me actually facilitate it and improve the property.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
All right, gentlemen. What are your thoughts?
I think there are other people waiting to speak.
Oh, okay.
Chairman, there's
So-
Diane Gilbert.
Who?
Diane Gilbert.
Okay, Diane Gilbert.
Yes, Diane Gilbert. I kind of go way back with Sue Guiducci and John Souza regarding the Schofield farm. So I have a pretty good memory about what happened back then in 2006. And I just want to echo what the other opponents have already said, so as not to take up a lot of your time. But I do worry about hearing things like changing the historic character of that property, the heritage landscape of that property. And then talk about potentially, well, maybe we'll have to demolish the house if it's not going to fit in with the requirements of the Farm Bureau. So, I mean, this is very fuzzy in terms of what the plans really are, because you all are down the road to try to figure all that out, and you have other visits to make with other boards in town. But since this apparently is the first stop, I don't know what people don't understand about the fact that this isn't in an overlay district, and why we're basically debating whether or not this place should be in an overlay district when it is not. So I'm opposed to this. I just am worried about, the changing character of the town. I understand that the farming couple who purchased this way back when had good intentions about conforming with the grant requirements of CPC and other requirements, including the Farm Bureau. But that still is not a good enough argument, a persuasive argument for me to say, okay, it didn't work out, so now let's change the intent of this very old farm and do something else with it, because that's kind of what's going on in the world now, growing marijuana. And I also want to add to everybody else's comment, I'm not against cannabis growing, just not there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Is there anyone else out there, Mr. Manise?
John's iPad.
Yes, Mr. Maderas, John Souza again. I would imagine the Board of Appeals may hold off on a decision until they hear something from the Farm Bureau. And the Farm Bureau holds the APR and the deed restrictions on the on the farm and also on the infrastructure envelope. I'm not an attorney. I don't know if the Farm Bureau now has the right to change that document. I know any changes to the farm operation and buildings, you got to get Farm Bureau approval. So I would hope the Board of Appeals, if Farm Bureau approves this structure in any location, whether it's on the residential lot that was for single-family residential purposes only, whether it's approved for that lot, they change their regulations, or it goes in the restricted area. I hope the Board of Appeals doesn't base their decision on the Farm Bureau's decision that they may be in favor of the cannabis operation here. I would hope the Zoning Board of Appeals considers the original intent of the CPC, the original intent of the Ag Commission, what was presented to town meeting at a great cost. I hope you consider all that. I hope you consider the impacts that if the Board of Appeals were to grant this. As a longtime CPC member, and I'm a volunteer and planning on continuing volunteering for years, it's going to have an impact on my decisions going forward. If the Ag Commission or anybody else presents something to the town where we purchase a farm and put it in APR, I'm going to be quite concerned that, you know, we put on restrictions and they're overridden by, you know, the Farm Bureau or the Board of Appeals. That's quite concerning, and it's going to have an impact, I think, on me certainly, and I think I can comfortably speak for others on the CPC on how they vote in the future on whether we purchase farms to be preserved, because what I'm saying, this one's at risk of not being preserved. It's at risk of we're banning the residential use, we're banning the crops in the field. It's scary to me that this is occurring, that the town invested this kind of money. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Mr. Manise?
Attorney Maduris, Sue Kazuchi.
Sue?
Yes, I just wanted, I agree with everything that John said, and I also want to reiterate that I wouldn't want to jeopardize our opportunity to protect more farmland in Dartmouth because of what could happen as a result of a decision made by this board. That's all.
Sue, just to address that, that puts us in a very precarious position. We can't consider that as a means as to what's put forth to us as a board. There are statutory requirements that they're required to, and they have the burden of proving to us. And if they do that, then quite frankly, we are in a position where we have to grant them a variance if they meet the statutory requirements. I'm not saying they have. I'm just saying if they do. The fact of what it's going to deter or not deter moving forward is really not of relevance, but I understand the concern. All right, I appreciate the concern.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else, Mr. Manise?
Mr. Chair, I don't see anybody else.
All right. So I guess we have a few options, gentlemen, and I'm open to whatever you gentlemen would like to provide, but we have the option of continuing the matter so that we can digest this further if need be. If any of you don't feel comfortable in making a decision one way or the other this evening, we also have the option of moving forward, and we could leave the public hearing open and make determinations of findings of fact. And we also have the ability to, get a sense as to where the members are in their feeling in denying something like this.
Mr. Chair, I think for me personally, I think after hearing tonight's testimonies and with the facts that were presented to us in the past couple of weeks. I don't think I'm ready to make a decision tonight on this. I like to digest it a little bit more. That's my first reaction to this.
I appreciate that. How about you, Mr. Human?
I'm in the same position as Mr. Schuba. I would want to have a little more time to think about this.
I'll be honest with you, Alvin. I'd like to read, I got to read that restrict. I did read the restriction, but I will be honest, when I read this as part of a multi-page packet, I did read through it. I don't think I gave it the level of scrutiny that maybe it deserves. But being a lawyer, I was basically, thinking that, well, the petitioner will hone anything out. If there was anything here, we'd know about it. But quite frankly, I think you did a very, very good job. Petitioner has made this an extremely difficult situation for us in that, they're coming close to, proving that they have certain, certain criteria to meet this burden. But I still take some issue. I still have some issues with the character of the neighborhood and the type of neighborhood that it's been for decades. One thing I didn't know, I presume that there's always some intent to these preservations, these restrictions, these preservation restrictions. There's always some intent by these boards to preserve a certain type of either use, character, a look, an aesthetic. That's their primary goal for the most part for boards of this type. And certainly both Sue Guiducci and Mr. Souza certainly provided some light on that for us as to what the intent was. And I have some issues with that as well, about what the original intent was with this, that it was going to be used as a farm, and it was a farm of a certain character. I'd like to say, well, as a board or a committee, you should have put a restriction in there. If you didn't want this type of use on a farm, you should have put that in the preservation restriction. But I don't know whether or not marijuana was legalized at that point in time. So it's not something that could have foreseen. In addition to that, there's always the argument that this is outside of the overlay district. Although, some people argue that it's nearby. It's a property in the roadway away from the outer perimeter of the overlay district. So I'll be honest, I'm struggling as well. So I think it would be prudent that we do continue the matter. We could put it on for the next hearing date if necessary, or if we needed more time, if you gentlemen think we need more time, we could do that as well. We could also, although there's been a comment to the contrary that we shouldn't rely on the opinion of the Farm Bureau, that we should be acting independently, but there's always the possibility of us deferring this and asking the petitioner to go to Farm Bureau first and get a determination from them. But again, the petitioner has made it loud and clear at the last hearing that it's, you got to put the cart, it's not the cart in front of the horse. It's, there's several different steps that they got to take. There's not necessarily any logistics or a numerical order as to how this needs to be conducted.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Chair. I'm kind of struggling with this. I've been on this board for a long time. You know that. I look at every case. We always every case is different, and we do have the power. And people were saying, I heard some of the presenters questioning whether we can do this. Yes, they do this because the Zoning Board of Appeal has the authority to issue a use variance, and that's why we're here as a board. But again, there's a statutory requirements for issuing a variance, and I'm not sure. I think they might need some of that has to do with the shape and the soil of but the intent. This is what I'm struggling with, given the history of this piece of property. That's why I'm going back and I'm saying we always look at each case by case. There's the history of this property, how it's evolved from where it was to where it's now, is something that we need to look at and be careful with. That's why.
I
Mr.
agree.
Chair, I think my big concern, not only the issue about the overlay district. I mean, I agree, we have the authority to approve this if we choose to approve it. I've looked at the facts. I think that they probably qualify on the issue of hardship based on what I've heard. However, the part that really bothers me is the agricultural preservation restriction. I mean, that's on record at the Registry of Deeds, and it specifically authorizes the Farm Bureau in perpetuity to control this land. In the first paragraph, it uses that language. So it seems to me they're the first people to go to say, can we do this? And then come back. And if the Farm Bureau says, oh yeah, no problem, it's agricultural, you can grow marijuana on that property any way you want, then at that point, I think that's when you come before the board and say, we want the use variance. But that's how I'm looking at it now. But again, I want more time to think about it as well.
Okay. So gentlemen, I'm going to give the petitioner's counsel the opportunity for the last word, just so that he can leave us with whatever his thoughts are in our minds over the next few weeks until the next hearing date. Attorney Manning, is there anything, you don't have to, there's nothing for you to add. You've done a great presentation. You've made this difficult, it appears, for all of us at this point. And you do know the heavy burden. You do carry a heavy burden.
I'm used to it. I've done it for years.
All right.
I'd like to, you know me, some of you know me personally. I got to get my last 2 cents in. So I want to address Mr. Human's concern. The last thing he stated. Yeah, sure. We can go, you can say, all right, let's make it contingent on what the Farm Bureau says, or why don't you go to the Farm Bureau first? Then we go to the Farm Bureau and say, well, wait a minute, you're not in the overlay district. So you need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals to get their approval. So I mean, we could end up being a ping pong ball between all these different boards.
Richard, I see why you came here first.
Yes, yeah, because of the warm reception we would get, and we knew that would go over well. You know, and I want to emphasize something both you and Mr. Chuba addressed. You know, people say, well, this should be in the overlay district. If we could pick up our piece of property and drop it in the overlay district, we would have done it months ago, okay? But we can't, okay? We can't move the property. I was on the Board of Appeals in Rochester for 14 years, and I heard every single meeting, the comments I heard tonight, you'll be setting precedents. No, you are not setting precedents. As you all have acknowledged, if every decision you gave set precedents, we wouldn't be arguing this tonight because you've already allowed marijuana establishments outside the overlay district. That didn't create a precedent. Otherwise, we could rely upon it and get it with no problem.
Right.
Zoning is created and your board exists because it recognizes that there are exceptions to every provision, whether it's a dimensional requirement or it's a use requirement. And you guys breathe life into the Zoning Board of Appeals regulations by looking at a case-by-case basis, as Mr. Chuba said, and breathe life into it and say, listen, there is an exception warranted. And your guidance for that exceptions are under 40A, the standards to be met for a variance. We have shown uncontroverted evidence that the soil conditions in this property warrant the variance. We've shown unconverted evidence that there's a financial hardship involved here, which I want to address. You know, I guess a lot of these people seem to be happy that because the town invested $800,000 in the property, they have no problem with my client going bankrupt and going down the tubes with this property. What do you think that's going to do to the property if it goes to foreclosure, or if she can't farm the property and she loses all the money? What do you think it's going to get better? You know, that does not justify and should not even be considered what the town paid or why they paid for it. the question is, can she make a go of it now? Can her crops sustain this property? And it's unequivocally no. That's the financial hardship. And then the last thing you have to consider is it going to derogate from the intent or purpose of the bylaws? Not from the intent and purpose of the restriction or of the purchase of the property, but of the zoning bylaws. Is it going to? Absolutely not. If anything, it's going to be a benefit to this community. So to me, if I was back on the Board of Appeals like I used to be, this is a slam dunk. You've unequivocally shown every criteria for a variance. So when you go to bed tonight and you're thinking about this case, as I know some of you will, think about that. Think about the criteria of the variance. Think about what you need to consider, and then think about whether or not we've shown it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you. You're
Manning.
making it harder.
All right, so gentlemen. Well, he's not, are you willing to make a motion, Mr. Manning, to continue the matter till our next hearing date?
No, he's gonna request he's not.
I
making
don't
a
believe
motion.
I can make a motion,
God, I'm sorry.
Michael. I
I'm
don't.
sorry.
believe
Will you make,
I can
I
make
didn't mean a motion.
I will not. My client does not object to it. If that's what you
All right.
want to ask.
I'm hungry. I guess that's what's going on. I must be hungry. And it's affecting my,
Mr. Chair,
obviously you can't
before-
make a motion.
Mr. Chair, before we make a motion, we're looking at April 13th or March 23rd.
We can't go March 23rd. We have two cases that night. It's the same property, but it could be a lengthy meeting.
Oh, okay. Is that, so we have to go to April 13th?
April 13th, this will be the third case. We have the continued one from earlier. We have a variance, another variance for signage, and now this one.
Okay.
Then we can move it to
No, that's May.
May
Right.
11th.
Oh.
May 11th.
No, I think Attorney Manning, April 13th is okay.
We
Okay.
can't hear you. We can't hear
He's
you,
muted.
Richard.
Can't hear you.
April 13th is fine. The March 23rd is actually fine with me as well, because I have that case as well. So
Oh,
you
you
can have a
do?
whole night of, you can have the whole night of meetings.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I mean,
didn't realize
Michael, what do you think? I mean,
I don't know, hold on. So what do we have on March 23rd? What do we have on right now?
We have a
We
special
have-
permit and a variance for property on the corner of Tucker Road and Route 6.
and Attorney Manning is representing, so.
Both, yes.
It's basically one petition for Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we need a
Okay.
variance
Okay,
as
And a special
well as a
permit.
special permit. That's really all one hearing. So if you wanted to
Correct,
consider
correct.
this.
It is one hearing,
I
but
have no
two
problem.
separate applications.
okay,
Why
fine. We'll
not?
put it on.
You-
we'll put
You're
it on for the
already
tw-
there.
We'll put it on for the 23rd.
Okay, okay.
All
So,
right, thank you.
Are you gonna make the formal request to continue, Mr. Manning?
No, he's,
You want it to come, well, I think if the board makes a motion and votes to continue it, that I will assent to it. If that's the proper form that I'm familiar with.
well, typically, our practice has been that the petitioner would make the request. And then we would make the motion.
sure.
If that's what you like, I request the continuance to March 23rd.
All right.
Okay.
So gentlemen, at this point, I'm gonna need a motion so that we can continue this matter.
I make a motion that we continue case 2022-01 to March 23rd, 2022, as requested by the applicant.
Second that motion.
All in favor, roll call vote.
Halim Chuba, yes.
Alvin Newman, yes.
Michael Maderis, yes. All right, gentlemen, that takes care, that pretty much takes care of all the public hearings that we have on for tonight. Are there any other matters or any other housekeeping issues that we need to discuss as a board?
I have none, Mr. Chair.
I have none, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Agai, anything else that we need to discuss? I can't hear you, doctor.
He's muted.
You're
You're
muted,
you're muted.
Doctor.
There he goes.
No, thank you. I wish you all happy days until the next meeting.
All right, likewise, thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, so I'm gonna need a motion to adjourn, gentlemen.
I make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second,
Roll call vote,
Halim Chuba, yes?
Alvin Human, yes.
and Michael Maderis, yes.